Hello and welcome to our Facebook Live show, Pulse by HealthJobHub. I am Prashanti Naidu, founder of HealthJobHub.com. On today's show, we are going to be sharing with you tips and advice on how to create an authentic employer brand. I am super excited to introduce my special guest joining us live on Pulse. It's Serge Boudreau, founder of the Recruitment Flex podcast and highly successful talent acquisition leader. Good morning, Serge. Thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Good morning, Prasanchi. I'm doing great. It's actually the long weekend. It's beautiful out there, so can't complain at all.
Awesome. And thank you so much for being my special guest, part two on
Part two.
Health Job Hub. And, part one was extremely popular. It was a huge hit, I have to say. We have thousands of viewers that's tuned in and watched how to be successful when applying to a job online. So thank you for those awesome tips and advice. I'm excited for today's show. But just in case, Serge, if any of our viewers missed past one, do you mind just sharing a little bit more about yourself and telling us about your background and your great work experience?
Well, I can definitely. So, and I'm glad that episode went well because as you know, we had some technical difficulties. So, but hopefully, some people got some value out of it, which is great. Give you like a quick background as far as so I've been in recruitment for, I guess, close to 20 years now. So I've done practically every role. I spent a long time on the vendor side. So I worked at Indeed. So I was their director for Western Canada, and I was at Workopolis for almost 7 years. So for those who remember, Workopolis used to be quite popular here in Canada, quite well known. So spent a lot of time there, and now I'm a practitioner. I lead a talent acquisition team for a local tech company, and also I have the podcast, the Recruitment Flex, which really has right now. I'm so blessed and fortunate for Santi. It has the best guests. Like I think we've had every big name in recruitment join us, so I've learned a lot from it. On a personal side, I am a father of three, including 1.5-year-old identical twins and a 5-year-old. And I'm married to the most amazing woman that just keeps it all aligned and keeps me aligned as well.
Oh my goodness, that's brilliant. And hats off to you for having three kids under, what's it, five?
Well, five. So
Yeah.
Mallory, my oldest one, just turned five. So yeah, as you know, it's a handful for sure, but I know we get it done, and it's a blessing. So I can't complain.
Yeah, and also to then found and create this amazing podcast, Search. So I have to admit that today's topic was actually planted in my mind by your podcast, because recently you've been talking so much about employer branding and you've had some amazing guests on your show,
Mm.
as you've outlined. So yeah, if anybody doesn't know, definitely tune into the Recruitment Flex. Serge, where can they find it, and what's it? What's all the details?
Yeah, so basically anyone it's available on every podcatcher. So if you
Yes.
listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify is I think those are the two biggest one, Google Podcasts, but we're pretty much on every small podcast. So when just go to whatever podcast listener you go to, just type in the Recruitment Flex and you'll find us. We can also be found on the recruitmentflex.com. You can listen there. We have a LinkedIn page under the Recruitment Flex. So there's multiple ways that you can find it. But yeah, if you're interested in employment brand, recruitment, definitely there's certain good topics. And you're right, we've had the people in employment brand. So James Ellis, the author of Talent Chooses You, was recently on our episode, which
Mhm.
is basically the Bible of employment brand. The guy is just a genius, gets it, been working a long time. Then we had Elena Valentine, who is the CEO of Skill Scout, and she talks a lot about leveraging video in your recruitment marketing and employment brand. So some of the topics and the answers I'll give you, Prasanti, might be just complete me telling you what they said because they had amazing knowledge that they shared with my audience. So hopefully I can share some of that to you as well.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And I think employer branding is such an important issue, especially for our healthcare organizations, especially for clinics, because really the clinics that I work with are really looking for those in-demand, hard-to-find candidates, and they are trying to do everything possible to be able to, like get a physician or for a nurse to join their team. And one of the sort of competitive advantages that they could actually start implementing is employment branding. So I am so excited by today's episode. I think we're going to have so much value for these healthcare organizations and employers. So let's get started. What would you say is employment brand? Like, just let's start with the basics. What is employment brand?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and hopefully we can go into that subject as far as how these smaller clinics can compete against the big guys, so like the health authorities or whatever the case is. But so what employment brand is really how people perceive how it is working at your company, and that's both internal and external. You got to put in perspective that your internal talent too perceives what it is working at your company and how it compares to what companies out there as well. So it's really your brand. And it's like every small business, every large business has an employment brand. It's really for you to decide if you're actually going to be aware of it and do something about your employment brand, because it's there, like no one's avoiding it. Or so really employment brand is really the perception of your business, of how it is to work at your business from
Mhm.
internal and external talent.
And tell me, how is, or why rather, is employment brand important in recruitment?
Well, I think it goes exactly to your earlier point as far as it is really, and like we're going to see how COVID and like what happens and what's happening in the world is going to affect this. But I would say for the last 10 years, been really a candidate driven market. So meaning the candidates have the upper hand when it comes to they have options, especially top talent will always have options, and you have to put that in consideration. So you have to be able to tell a story that attracts these people to either come work at your company, your clinic, or whatever the case is. And that story might be different for different segment of people. Some people might really care about how involved the company is in the community. Someone might care in their part of their life. Maybe they have young kids and it's all about how much money they can save. So what's really important for them is the money they can make. For some people, it's in reality, it's like, do they get breakfast served at their office? So there's all these perks. Do they have a ping pong table? And obviously, different people have different attraction drivers that makes them um, want to work for your company. So if you're small or large, if you're small, you got to see how you can compete and how you can offer something that is different than what your competitor is, or and that is really attractive to a large segment of people to work for you. And that can be everything I listed. So your pay, benefits, what's the work environment? How is it to work there? What type of people you work with? So those are all factors.
Brilliant, brilliant. And tell me, how is employer brand different from consumer brand? And how do consumer brand and employer brand interact with each other? And I'm sorry for all these technical questions, Serge. I just want our viewers to kind of like really
Yeah.
wrap their heads around why employer brand is so important and how it actually, is differentiates from that consumer brand that people are more, familiar with.
Yeah, so I think consumer brand, or you can also call it corporate brand, which can be a little different from consumer in that sense. Um, eh, it's been interesting because employment brand is so different. And when we talk about recruitment marketing and tie it into employment brand, it is very different because it's all a game of quantity. I think one of the biggest challenges in recruitment is always not getting too much. So put that in perspective. You put a job out, you market it, you start getting 300-400 candidates. That takes a lot of resources for your recruitment team to go through all those resumes, make sure that each candidate is communicated to, even if we're not moving forward to. So part of it is creating that unique story that attracts the right candidates. So the amount of candidates that apply for your company are all qualified. They're in a position that you'd like to hire them. So you're better off getting 10 really qualified candidates than 300 maybe not qualified. As marketing, obviously there's qualified leads, but in marketing itself, and if you're selling, say, a soap, well, you want to sell thousands, so it's all a quantity game. So a little bit of a different, but to give you a perspective, so employment brand and consumer brands are going to be a little bit different, but they should align in saying that the message should not be very different. If your company on the consumer brand is very involved in, say, community awareness, on volunteering, like that should translate into your employment brand as well, because that's important. But it's really interesting because when we talk about employment brand, we think about putting nice, fancy ads out there, having a really cool website, but it's all about the candidate experience. And what I mean by that is if the candidate is not getting a good experience, the recruiter doesn't call them back, they don't hear anything, it could potentially affect your consumer brand that people in the past didn't relate that because if you have a bad experience at a particular company, are applying for a job? Are you gonna buy from there? Probably not. So that's the other factor we have to put in place is consumer and employment brand are different. One is trying to attract basically people buying your product. One is trying to attract someone to work at your company, but they're not mutually exclusive. They can actually work together. So it's always a big thing. And like James Ellis actually on the podcast mentioned, and it really struck me is your Glassdoor reviews, which is usually what they're saying is a measure of your employment brand. And I disagree that Glassdoor reviews are a measure of your employment brand. They're really a measure of your recruitment process. And like one of the things he said, and it really struck me, is you can have the best work environment. You can promise puppies all day. So when you work at company ABC, you're going to come in and you're going to get to cuddle with puppies all day. But then you come in and you can only cuddle with puppies half the day, which is still amazing. But you were promised cuddles for a full day and you only get a half day. So now my impression of your company is like, well, that's not exactly what you promised. So, and even though you're giving me half day, you promised me full day. So, a lot of the times when you're looking at Glassdoor reviews, it's an indictment or a praise of your recruitment process. How did you treat your candidates going through the process? So, anyways, that's a really long-winded answer, Prasanti, but I hope that gives you really a perception between consumer and employment brand. They're very important. There should be some alignment, but they market to different people.
100%. And, you know, this is so relevant for clinics and healthcare organizations because they do provide a service, an essential service, being healthcare and therapy, depending on what clinic it is. But then they also have brands within their clinics that they are selling product to the consumer. So yeah, no, it's great that we were able to define the difference between the two, but also to understand that they are very interrelated, and it's coming back to customer service at the end of the day. You know, it's making sure that every aspect of our relationships, either it's with the consumer or with our employees, are well thought of and well taken care of, and it's consistent as well. You know, the messaging is consistent. So
I have a question for you on that end. So you work with a lot of fairly small clinics at HealthJobHub. brand? Is that something, a conversation that's happening with your clients? Is it something that they're aware of and they're actively trying to make sure that they put their best foot out there?
Yes, I have to say that the clients that we are currently talking to, especially the ones who are posting on our site at the moment, they are all very aware of their brand and their image, and they've all, taken out the plans where we have social media advertising. So that speaks volumes to me. It's because they want people to know their brand and they want to share all the benefits of working with them. In fact, I think it was our first episode in season 2. We had an employer, Nose Creek Physiotherapy, who came on and shared about his clinic and shared about why it's a great place to work at and the opportunities he has. And he's actively trying to build his employer brand. But if you go to his website and you look at his website, he is so active in building his consumer brand as well, because he's got such great, white papers on his website that you can download to talk about sleep therapy or, physiotherapy, different areas that give people, specific concerns. He has a resource for you. So he's trying to cover all his bases, and he feels that employment brand is just as important as all the work he's doing on consumer brand. And then likewise, we have another client who's Jack Nathan Medical, and they are advertising for medical clinic partners across Canada for physicians to join their team. And they shared a video with us and they showed us what's it like partnering with them. And so if you go to our website and if you go and click on their video in their job listing, it's amazing, like the experience of just opening a brand new clinic within a Walmart superstore, and have, as a physician, having this turnkey opportunity to work in a state-of-the-art facility and the big grand opening that goes with it. It's all about their employer brand. They are trying to promote their employer brand to show that we deliver top class, high quality service to our partners, and this is why you should partner with us, really. So I do believe employer brand is something that's very, very important in healthcare, and it definitely is that competitive advantage because the skills and the talent is in such short supply. So that's how they're defining themselves right now. No problem. No problem. I love our show.
We're going to do a little bit of a mid-show adjustment and put the good old wired headphones on.
Perfect.
You can hear me okay?
Perfectly, 100%.
Well,
I love our show for this.
So, Prasanti, one of the things that you mentioned there, which I think is really helpful, because if you have small clinics listing, I think one of the things is they need to be competing against the big regional authorities or the provincial authorities or whatever the case is. And how do you tell a story that's different? Because what someone might be attracted to go to AHS as an example, or the big one in Ontario, compared to your clinic is, well, you might have more flexible hours. You have a more sense of what your day-to-day. You might have the state-of-the-art equipment that you just said. So these are all factors that you have to figure out what differentiates yourself from those larger, and sometimes the large ones need to differentiate themselves from the smaller ones as well. So
yes.
What I always say, if you have any employees and like the whole, I guess, transformation or the whole voyage to get to a really good employment brand is figure out why people at your company are working there. So something attracted them to work there. Hopefully, and hopefully it wasn't just that you had a job, they applied, but there's something about your clinic, your company that attracted people to go work there. So biggest thing I would say when you're starting your whole journey is like, you got to be talking to the people that are working there and figuring out why they came, and the answers lie there. That's maybe your unique proposition. They might be coming directly from your employee. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Brilliant piece of advice. I really like that. Finding the why, and actually sometimes you may not know that but you have to go and talk to the people who are there working for you to find out what their why is, to really understand that point as well. So brilliant. I like that piece of advice. So now we're getting on to like really the meaty part of this conversation. What are your top tips and advice to employers to create an authentic employer brand?
Yeah, I think this is one, and it's interesting because this is where I think smaller business have an advantage because the larger corporations tend to overproduce and overthink of what your employment brand is. So they'll bring in either like they'll create, say they'll everyone has seen the corporate videos that are create that really, to be honest, are not really that good. But the CEO likes it because it just portrays this very professional image. But you got to be putting perspective. Who are you trying to attract? And these are people. And what type of content do they like to consume is very important as well. So the biggest mistake you can do is overproduction, especially with everything going on in the world with COVID, with Black Lives Matter, with everything. Is people are looking for a true, authentic voice. So, and they want to see companies that are actually going to back up what they say. So that is, how do you put that message out? So this is where the power of the smartphone. Now, I have a tool in my pocket and I have all these free tools out there that I can actually create some really cool content that I can put out there. If you're a small clinic, you should start creating content for LinkedIn, Facebook, all the mediums, and like don't worry about perfection. Worry about putting the real picture of yourself out there. It will have a much bigger impact than perfection, because I always say it is, if you're waiting for perfection, you're never going to get anything done. And really, you're not the judge of that content. It's the people that are watching or listening to your content who are the judge. So, and sometimes we judge ourselves way too hard. I know I do that with the podcast, and you probably do this with this show. Is you're like, I missed this part, or like I spoke too much, and then when you listen back or other people listening, you'd be like, no, it was great. So, don't overthink it. But in reality, you should involve your employees. And when we talk about a true, authentic self, if your company is, don't lie, like put the real picture. In reality, people want to know what it is to work there. So if you promise that full day of puppies and you can't offer that, well, that's going to affect your employment brand. If like you, a lot of people think that perks are what it cares. Like if people go work for Google because they get free lunch or whatever the case is, if that's not something you can offer, that's cool too. You just have to figure out what you can offer and what that real story. But the other thing when it comes to authentic, don't use stock photos. If you want to like really, it drives me crazy when I see stock photos, especially when they're trying to portray diversity and inclusion and they have stock photos of actually people that don't work there, and you go work there and it's like either not diversify at all. It's false advertising in that sense. So using real people is really important. There's also really a trend to have what we call user-generated content. So internal employees are actually creating content. You can create internal competitions. I know at the company I work at, we do a lot of that. We do, like, every week we have a different employee doing an Instagram takeover. So they run our Instagram account for the day, and we then take that content and create different content with it that we can leverage for our advertising. And we have very smart, creative people, and some of the content they create is like, wow, like I don't even need to do anything. I don't even need to edit it. I can just package it as one of our advertising, and it really shows what the true self of what it is to work at a company. Because people are going to believe people that are actually working there more than the CEO, president, high level executives. They're going to believe people that are actually doing the job. So one of the things that I've seen you do, and I think it's brilliant, is video job postings. Have the hiring manager talk about what it is working there. But I think you said at the start, authentic is being authentic. There's no way you can't fake that. If you try to fake it, people will see it and your cover's blown.
No, 100%. I completely agree with you. In relation to what we do at HealthJobHub and video job postings, I have to admit that some employers are a little bit nervous about this.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them, because it seems a little bit intimidating about getting onto the camera, and especially coming live onto a camera. It could take a lot from somebody. But I want to assure everybody listening to this video, it's really, really not so bad. And it's quite, interesting to just hear the perspective of that employer sharing why their company is such a great place to work at and why should you join your team. So I definitely encourage that, other employers out there, get onto your smartphones or come onto our show and share with everybody, that you are recruiting, number one. Everybody wants to know who's hiring now, especially in these COVID days. So share that with us, and also produce that content that is going to set you apart, from a traditional, flat, black and white, boring job posting that nobody really has the time to read anymore. It just literally goes out of the screen like within seconds, but a video can capture your attention for at least 5 to 6 seconds. And in 5 to 6 seconds, you can nail it.
So a question for you is, so with obviously the world of work has changed with COVID as well, and people are way, like I'm on video calls 5 6 hours a day.
Mhm.
Do you think the new way of work is going to change how people are comfortable in front of a camera? Because if you weren't before, pretty much it's now a skill or a knowledge that you have to have for the workforce, because we do a lot over video conferencing, a lot more than we used to. What's your thoughts around that?
I think it's 100% a game changer. It definitely is going to be changing, especially for healthcare. And I'll give you my perspective from a healthcare industry viewpoint, how that's going to be changing. I was listening to a podcast that Michelle Romano was on, and she was sharing information about a call she was on with, I think, the CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt. And
Yes.
they asked him what was his prediction for the future post COVID. And, obviously nobody has a crystal ball, but one of his main predictions was that the general practice or the family practice or the medical clinic that we know of is going to be obsolete, because he feels that this type of care can be moved virtually, and it has moved virtually. COVID has forced us into going virtual, and therefore having that skill to be able to go on live or go onto a Zoom call and communicate with the other person is critical now going forward. So I don't think it is going to be industry specific, like only for healthcare. I think across industries, it is a skill that's very necessary in today's new world we are forced into, that you have to learn how to communicate and communicate effectively over video conferencing. Um, and yeah, who would have ever dreamt that you're going to be seeing your, GP or your family doctor online? But this is it. This is the new world, and I think it's brilliant because it's going to free up so much of time and resources for people, and it's just creating efficiency in my mind. I feel that it's just forcing everybody to be efficient and highly effective at what they are doing, and I'm of the view that we should embrace that change, just try and learn as much as we can. And you've rightly pointed out, Serge, sometimes, you don't have to be perfect. It's just about starting, practicing, and, in anything, playing a piano, learning to play tennis, practice makes perfect. It's the same thing
Yes.
for video conferencing. The more you practice, like look at my shows, Pulse by HealthJobHub. I started in March, and oh my goodness, 100% not perfect, but it's coming along every week. So it's something that we just have to try.
Well, exactly. And if we look at the whole world of work, the next 20 years is very skill based. Like we talk a lot about like the gig economy or whatever the case is. And I don't know if it's the gig economy, what I like to call it. In some ways, there's the gig economy, but there's also kind of I guess, the hustle economy, meaning that the more skills that you have, the more viable you're going to be in the workforce and more you can bring to different companies. That doesn't matter in what sector and what industry, what vertical you work in. But if you can learn how to, like, example, even edit video, how to produce content, think about the value of a small clinic. If you have the ability that you can create really compelling social media posts with video, you can create video job postings, things like that. These are all skill set as a potential employee that companies are going to be looking for. So being comfortable on camera is, unfortunately or fortunately, is it's going to be very important in the next 15, 20 years. But you got to put it in, there's the other factor is too, is not everyone's ever going to be fully competent or really attracted to it on camera, and that's fine. You got to find where your niche is, and for some people, they're wonderful writers and do that. Some people are great, but the more skill sets you can learn, or skills that you can learn in this new economy, it's very worthwhile. You'll leverage it for sure.
No, that's brilliant. And, I think our this top tips and advice to employers to create an authentic employer brand nicely merged in. And I think we covered a lot of it, but I don't know if you have any other takeaways. What would it take for employers to create great video content for the employer brand? And I know we just covered a lot of that
Yeah.
in this question, but, I think my question there is, does video content really set you apart? Is that what makes you be authentic? Because it's you, or it's your, employees coming onto the video and sharing their stories, or or could we do it outside of video content as well?
Well, you have to find your voice, and video is one that I think is pretty straightforward because you're really seeing a true picture of someone, or at least a pretty clear representation. So video is going to be important, as we said at the start. It's you need to figure out how to stand out, and there's so many different ways. And how we've always looked at video is that overproduction, large, very expensive. So you think about you're a small clinic or you're even a corporation, be like, the cost of bringing a production team and everything involved it can be really intimidating, and really you might not feel you're getting the value of. So, but content creation from your smartphone, because the smartphone, as we were talking before, is, like, think about it, like, Rasanti, like, we didn't have a tool like this 10 years ago, 5 years ago, in the same quality. Like, an iPhone 11 now is, like, probably better than and, like, for any camera fanatics on, it's probably better quality of camera than it was 15 years ago, just straight from a thing you have in your pocket that you can actually, so think about it, you can actually take the video, you can edit it, you can actually publish it, and then you can create the marketing around it all from your smartphone. Like, I do everything from my smartphone. Like, I edit our podcast, so, which is audio but different. I've edited parts of our video podcast as well, right from my cell phone. So I think video creation and showing your true authentic self is going to be very important. Don't think about the overproduction, and you might get to a point that you want to bring in a company like we had Elena Valentine from Skill Scout. You might want to bring someone at that particular point to help you guide, create your whole strategy and how it works. But my advice is just, like, start recording. I think it's Gary Vaynerchuk. It says document everything you do, which I think is true. Like, people want to see behind the current. So that's something you can leverage as well. So to answer your question, along with kind of winded way is yes, I think it's really important to leverage video, but don't overthink it. Start creating. There's free software on there to editing as you get better. Like you
Yes.
said, Prasanti, no, I think you were good at the start, but you've gotten better at what you're doing here. And it's the same. Just start doing, and then it will get better. People, like, it takes years to build a brand. It takes years. So it's not something you get one video, you get 2 likes, you're like, oh, that didn't work out. No, you keep creating content and you keep getting better. People will see what it is to work at your clinic or at your company.
Awesome, awesome. And I see we have a viewer comment. I think it's a comment and not a question, but it says agreed. I think our viewer agrees with us on a lot of the points that we are making. And now there are virtual offices. Actually, that's a good point, Serge. What are your thoughts on virtual offices?
Well, I think I've worked remotely for years. So coming into this situation, obviously I'm working remotely right now, is what I found in this world, because what, like, my situation was, we had a head office in Toronto and I was one of very few employees that worked out of Calgary. So when we had meetings, I was on the Zoom call or WebEx or whatever we use, and everyone was in a meeting room. Talk about a huge disadvantage. It is a huge, but now everyone is working from home, giving the aspect. I think right now with COVID, and if we look at the U.S., especially with all the cases, the mandation of having employees come back into the office, to me, is kind of ridiculous, because we can be so much more effective working virtually with the right tools if we're set up right at home with the proper equipment, that we can do video calls. Like I said, my work right now, I do probably 5-6 Zoom calls a day. I actually am expanding people that, if you work in an office, you're going to have the people you work with, but you don't always go outside that circle. As now with video, it kind of like it puts everyone in the same position. So I think we're going to see a lot more of it. Companies are realizing that they can be way more effective. I think the challenge is a lot of the CEOs and like senior executives are in a generation that they don't feel comfortable working remotely. They feel like if you're not in office, as I'm not seeing what you're doing on a daily basis, you're not performing or you're not doing your job. So I think we're going to see that where that's going to change, like the new leadership. So I'm Generation X. Then if we look at most of senior leadership is the boomer generation, and love the boomers, and but in reality, they're used to a way of work that is changing right before their eyes. Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z want their work to be judged on performance and on actual production, not based on how many hours I put in at what particular time. There's horrible examples out there of companies, I think I mentioned in my last podcast, of companies having the employees have their Zoom on all day so they can go in and check. If you're that company,
LinkedIn, like, what is that about? That is crazy.
you're gonna fail. You're gonna fail if your company is like that. So yeah, no, I think virtual is the future. I think if you're a white collar employee, you better get used to working virtually, because you mentioned it. Even like seeing your physician, seeing your physiotherapist, like a lot of that is being done virtually. So yeah.
And I think in healthcare, it's going to be a little bit easier to provide that virtual service and to, be duly monitored, because everything is a consult almost. It's not sort of white collar and a lot of just paperwork. Of course, there is a lot of paperwork in healthcare too. I'm not underestimating that, but the key service, or the primary delivery is therapy, or it's providing advice and consultation. So it's very hard to get around that, and I think virtual is a brilliant format to communicate that. So I think in healthcare they're going to be a little bit better off than white collar industry, to be honest. So I just feel that we all need to embrace that, especially like clinical psychologists or psychiatrists. This is a brilliant platform. And I don't know if you've noticed, Serge, like there's been an emergence of so many like mental health sort of apps now that's released, that you can get mental health treatment and therapy on your smartphone. Like if it wasn't for COVID, we would not have had all these brilliant opportunities. So yeah, I think the virtual office is a good thing, and it's forcing change, but forcing change in the right direction. And it's just bringing more access to services, all around. So I think there's a lot of pluses as opposed to minuses on that one.
Yeah, I agree.
So, coming on nicely to our almost last question, how do you think employment brand will change post-COVID?
Well, I think COVID is just like, if let's put in perspective, there's COVID, which has been something as kind of a one in a generation, or one that's happened, and it's affected the way we work and how employ. But we've been part of so many. It's such an interesting time. Interesting is the word I'll use, but I'm sure there's other words you can use it. Well, let's look at COVID. Obviously, a lot of companies or a lot of employees are very concerned about their health. And then we put in perspective that that's really put a burden on companies. When I say burden, I mean likely is of they have to be very careful in how they treat their employees, because people will remember it, and people will be asking when they're going through the interview process, how well did you treat your employees during COVID? Did you help them? Did you give them the ability to work from home? What about the people that had maybe elderly parents that you did not want to put it? Did you accommodate these people so they wouldn't be a position that they would bring home? So I think that's going to be a question. And I've actually raised that question myself, and I'm like, I think candidates, for any candidates that are listening, I think this is something you're going to have to push employers as you're interviewing, because you're interviewing them as well. And the ones that didn't take care of their employees are going to see their employment brand suffer. And I think that's exactly the same with everything that's going on with equality and the Black Lives Movement, that people want to know where you stand. And just sitting on the fence, which still a lot of companies do, is it's just not going to be seen right. Like you're going to be seen as really, if you didn't speak out, and actually when I say speak out, you actually have to do something as well. You have to show true commitment and put action steps in place that you are a really equality-based employer, and that's a core element. But I think for COVID specifically, I think is how you treated your employees, how you treat it is going to be a question. You're going to find that on the Glassdoor and Indeed reviews. You're going to see some hints of how companies have done that. But I strongly suggest that if you're a candidate, that you start asking that question, because I'm nervous that employers will forget it. And a year from now, they'll go back to their old habits. So it's on us. When I say us, it's all candidates, future job seekers, anyone, to really put our employers to task on that. So I think it will change. I'm hoping it will. I will be really disappointed if 2 years from now that it just disappears, that companies don't care anymore.
No, I totally agree. And before I go on to this, to your comment, I also, heard of some incredible stories, especially from South Africa, where from healthcare employers, like the big, large, dominant ones, and their staff had gotten COVID. And what they facilitated was isolation. So, they would offer the healthcare workers the opportunity to quarantine outside their homes so that they can keep their families safe. And they provided accommodation and meals and care as well, for these healthcare workers. And I just thought that was absolutely brilliant because, for sure, as a healthcare worker, you do understand that your job by default is extremely risky at this stage. But then knowing that you have an employer that actually cares about your health and wellness as well as your family's health and wellness, and to be able to, put you into an isolation situation where you are very comfortable and looked after is almost unheard of. But employers are doing that, and I think that speaks volumes. And I think a lot of other healthcare employers who are listening in, this is a great tip for you. It's just about not how you are portraying your employment brand, but how you're actually treating those employees when they need you the most, especially now
Yes.
during COVID.
Well, like I said at the start, is your employer brand is really what the perception of your internal employees too. Like that is probably the most important thing. So when we talk about building your employer brand, like treat your employees well, and that will go a long way, because the best communicator of what it is to work within a company is someone that works within the company. So I love your point, like how people are treated, what it is going to be the biggest way that you can really build a strong employment brand.
Yes.
But also it's just being like, we're all in this together. It's all about being kind and a good corporate citizen to the world. So yeah, I agree with you completely.
No, 100%. So this is the comment. I think we were talking about, virtual offices, and I was actually saying that virtual offices is a really good thing. But Kirshni does not agree. She says that there's no buy-in from the patient population, or not
Mm.
great buy-in from the patient population. And also in terms of mental health, there's disparities between the lower income and the middle income and the higher income groups emerging. So, although I feel, and I can see this point clearly now, although I feel that for the employer perspective and the employee perspective, that virtual clinics can be a brilliant thing and would, result in a lot of access to healthcare. But if the patient who's receiving this treatment doesn't have access to the computer or to the Wi-Fi or to the internet, I could definitely see how that might impact the whole delivery of the, healthcare service. So yeah, no, that was a great point. Thank you.
I agree. That's a very good point, because and that's something that really I wasn't thinking about as far as the patients, and because there is a disparity in the world as far as we even think about it, and we kind of take an assumption that everyone has high speed internet access, but the percentage is actually a lot smaller than what we think it is, and there's definitely a disparity between low, middle, and also there's comfort level. Like we are native, like digital native in some ways, or not even. I think you're around the same generation as I am, but like we were the second phase of digital. But you think about kids coming up now, they're all digital native.
Oh,
But then you think about the population that uses healthcare services the most, they're not digital native. So this is a big shift for them. And this is like I know for like teaching my parents how to use their iPad to do FaceTime was a massive challenge. So I sense that pain, and there's something we're going to need to be done to make sure that that all levels of people, and when I say level, that's so, but basically low, middle, high income, all have the same access. So I don't know if that's. I think that's a discussion that probably professionals that know more about the healthcare sector should probably have, but it's a very good point.
no, no, thank you. Thank you, Karshni, for that. We have another viewer question. Thank you, Manny. Has the COVID pandemic not made employees seem to be liabilities than assets?
Um,
I'm giving
is
that one
it?
to you first.
Well, if your company sees your, and I would say you, I don't mean yourself, Manny, but if a company sees their employees as a liability, you probably don't want to be working there in so many ways. And I think what he's trying to say is because of reduce amount of so obviously a lot of business when COVID hit is a lot of projects were shelved, a lot of potential clients went away. So now it put no revenue is coming in, and you have all your employees to take care of. So that puts you in a very tough position, especially for small, medium business that are really sometimes surviving month to month or whatever the case is.
Mhm.
So I could see how you could potentially see it as a liability, but I rather use the sense that your employees got you to where you're at, and the ability to take care of them and put them in a position in the case that your business really is struggling. Employees will understand that you maybe need to put them on furlough, or you need to temporarily lay them off to put your business in a position that it can survive. But it all goes back to humanity and how what you do, and you do the maximum you can for that potential employee. But at the end of the day, we're in a knowledge economy. So as the economy recovers from this, losing your top employees right now, or laying them off and not bringing them back on when it picks up, you're going to be in a really tough situation, because it's really knowledge based, and it's really people that have a competitive advantage is with the people they have. So, and that's not going to change. So I would argue that definitely COVID has not changed anything in that end, that your employees are still your biggest asset. Obviously, you have to manage that with the current environment. But again, it's all about treating your people as fairly, and putting yourself. Empathy is such a skill that leadership needs now. You have to put yourself in your talent shoes, and make sure that you take care of them as much as you can.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Manny. Thank you for the question. And if there's any other viewer questions out there, please, share them with us on the live chat. If we don't get to them on the live show, we will get to them after the show as well. So thank you for participating. Serge, this was an awesome show. I love all the, brilliant insights you've given our viewers. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
Ooh, final thought. So I think the biggest thing is, when we're thinking, an employment brand might be just a big fancy word in so many ways. Like, we should always be aware, and even though the market has changed a little bit, that used to be very candidate driven, and obviously with COVID, it's more employer driven. But that will change really quickly as well. Like, the economy shifts really quickly, so you should always treat your employees with the best quality care, or the best situation for them to be able to thrive within your organization, because that is going to build your employment brand long term. Employment brand is not about fancy pictures and logos. It's really about the experience of a candidate that is applying there and someone that works there. So fix that first. Make sure that little things, when someone is applying for a job on your website, that it's very easy to do, because that you will get better quality candidate. And I know the opposite is, people say, well, if they take longer, they're more engaged. No, they have options. So instead of having your application process take 30 minutes, it should not take more than 5 minutes. There's research that shows that every minute after 2 minutes, you lose a pretty large percentage of the people going through the application process, because top talent has options, even though in a different economy. So think about the candidate experience. If you say you're going to call them to book an interview, call them to book an interview. If they're not a fit for your job, tell them. Don't ghost them, as the kids say now. So the candidate experience, this is what you can control with spending zero money as a small clinic, small business, medium, large company. You should take care of your candidates going through, and obviously your people that are working internally. It's very important to make sure that they feel warranted, and they're put in a situation to succeed within your company. So that's what I would say now is, like, take care of what you can, and you can control your candidate experience, and you can control your employee experience.
100%. And especially in healthcare, I have to re-emphasize the point that these candidates are in high demand. Nurses are in high demand. Physicians are in high demand. The way you as an employer look after your most valuable assets in this time where they are working in unprecedented circumstances and, faced with life and death situations on a daily basis, you can really define your employer brand by the way you look after those employees now at this stage. So this was amazing. Thank you so much for all your great tips and advice, Serge. I really, really took a lot of value from it. And one thing I would say, though, you did say that if employees need to post a job, they need to make it as quick and easy as possible, and not make the candidate wait. I totally agree. Like when I communicate with, for example, physician candidates, it's all via text messaging. A lot of it is like really quick, because number one, they don't have the time or the resources to just spend, uploading a CV and taking a lot of time answering an application online, and then they lose interest in that. So yeah, just trying to streamline your job posting or your application process for those employers and make that candidate experience much better than a traditional situation would be great. And to that point, HealthJobHub has a very, very streamlined application system. So like if you post a job and somebody's applying to the job, like less than 2 minutes, they can send an application to you and it's all good. And you get it straight into your inbox. So we make it so simple and straightforward for employers and job seekers to connect on our platform. And yes, it does sound like a marketing line here, but it's true because of our experience dealing with these candidates and understanding what they need and how they want to connect, we've streamlined our process to accommodate that. So I definitely encourage you, all employers out there watching, definitely consider using our platform, because we can definitely help you streamline and make it very simple for these candidates to connect with you. Special thanks to all our amazing viewers. Thank you for joining us live on this show, Pulse by HealthJobHub, and watching. Thank you for all your questions. We do appreciate that. If we don't get to you on the show, we will definitely get to you after the show. And don't forget, if you enjoyed our show, please smash the like button, follow us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and please share with your network. Thank you, guys. Stay safe and God bless.